John, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I had one of our listeners heard you with, I think it was Jimmy Church on Coast to Coast a few weeks ago, and said, Dave, this story needs to be fleshed out. You've got to have him on. You've got to talk with him and find out more about this. This is a fascinating topic. So I reached out. I'm thankful you're able to join us this evening. Let me start. Before we get into what's happened, have you always had an open mind and a faith and belief that there are other beings out there besides what we know of?
Well, I've always had an open mind pretty much about a lot of things, and that is that I believe that we have to, use our senses, and, we just have to use our minds and be somebody that tries to, learn about discernment and, just do the best you can with what comes in. There's so many weird stories out there now, just about everything in life that, I think we just have to be, reasonable people and try to, take everything one step at a time and just do a good job with it.
Had you had experiences through your life that you would put into the paranormal or supernatural category?
I've had a few. I've been on my own since I was like 12 years old, and that didn't help anything. So, I've been exposed to a lot of things over time.
And you say on your own, you've pretty much just been out there raising yourself doing this, or what?
Yeah, I actually just had a pretty bad upbringing in terms of my family and I didn't get along too well, and I left home real early, and so I raised myself.
All right. Starting in with this story, I want to do that when we come back from the break to really sink in and get rolling. But just to set the mood, first of all, can you let us know where you're located in the United States? Is that something you're open to?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I mean, we've because of all the attention that the ranch is getting, we've got people literally coming in from all over the world to visit. We've had different investigators that have come in and done more investigation work. We've literally got pilots flying over the ranch, taking readings. I mean, you name it. We've got just about everybody. It's actually Stardust Ranch is the name of the ranch, and it's located in a place called Rainbow Valley, Arizona, which is about 35 miles southwest of Phoenix, Arizona. We're out in the middle, literally, of about 200,000 acres of natural desert.
And explain your property to us. How big is it?
The property is 10 acres, and like I said, until recently, we were the only ones out here. And then just in the last few years, there's been a lot of development, so now we have houses on either side of us. But until recently, there was nothing out here.
And what do you use the property for now?
Well, we use the property actually for an equine rescue program called Hopeful Hooves. A long time ago, I was injured in a accident working at the Arizona State Hospital by a patient, and I had my back broken. And as I healed up after those injuries, I actually discovered what a great thing it was to work with horses. We had the ranch by that point, and I used to go out in the desert, and I'd run into all these horses that had been abandoned out there. Horses are very expensive to take care of. And, people were just having financial problems, I guess, and they were taking the horses out there and just leaving them in the desert, hoping that they would survive on their own. I started going out in a Jeep, and next thing I knew, it was like all the horses were aware of me, and I thought, wow, this is not a good thing. We need to do something about it. And the ranch was about 15 miles down the road, so I started bringing food. Next thing I knew, I had a herd of horses following me home to the ranch. And so that's what we've done ever since, is we have actually provided rescue services for horses, and that has just become eventually a nonprofit organization. And now we get horses occasionally from all over the country. When people call up and say, hey, I've got a horse, I can't keep it. I love the horse, but I will pay you, I'll pay to have the horse shipped to you. And so we end up taking the horse.
Wow, that's fantastic. And with your foundation, is there a way that we have so many animal lovers as part of our audience? Is there a way they can help out and be a part of it or make donations?
Oh, we would love that. I mean, I'll tell you what, horses are super expensive. It's about $3,000 a year to keep a horse in Arizona because of the cost of hay. There's not a lot of pasture. And people can go to our actual website, which is Hopeful, HOPEFUL, hooves, HOOVES.org, and actually see our organization. And it is our great hope that eventually we'll be able to open some more locations around the country, because there are so many horses out there that need help. And they really work great with kids. They work with, vets that are having issues. We use them to help, female survivors of domestic violence. So there's actually a lot of populations out there using equine therapy to get well. And it's a tremendous therapeutic tool. And I've been a therapist for many years and worked in behavioral health. And so, I've had a chance to study equine therapy extensively, and I've written programs now to help out with that.
Animals are very sensitive, they say, to aspects of the paranormal. Do the horses respond to what's going on your property as well?
Yeah, we've had so many incidents out here in terms of not only just direct contact with ETs, but we've had tremendous amount of UFOs. We've had giant black triangles that literally have just hovered over the property. They're absolutely silent, but they're a couple hundred feet off the ground, and the horse is just standing there and look at them. They don't know what they are.
Right.
We don't really know what they are except what shape they are and what color they are. They definitely they kind of get it, but they're not terrified by it. Even in the fact that we had some really bad incidents a number of years ago where we actually had 3 horses that were mutilated.
That's what I was going to ask. We always hear about these cattle mutilations. Has there been any impact on the horses' lives? But you said 3 of those. How long ago did that happen?
This is going back to late 90s that this occurred. We moved in June 1st of 96, and it just kind of took off from there. And we really didn't have any, real super negative contact between the horses and the ETs until about 97, 98, going on in that area.
When you had the mutilations occur to the horses, was it done in the standard pattern that a lot of times we see happen to the cows and cattle? Were they?
Indeed, it was.
Okay.
It was pretty much exactly the same in terms of what we found were horses that had had a terrible, terrible struggle. They literally were carved out with something that looked like a laser in terms of the wounds. There was no blood, but they were eviscerated. They were just, the hoofs were removed, the eyes were removed, the anus was cored out, and the sex organs were removed. It was gruesome. And of course, we called the Arizona Livestock Board. We called the sheriff. We filed reports. We did everything we could to try to, document it, took photographs, the whole works. So all that is all part of the story, unfortunately.
And was that all over a period of a night or a couple of nights, or spread over months with those 3 that were
No, it was actually spread over about a year and a half. And see, that was the whole thing, and that is, the more we looked into it, the more we realized that, there were no suspects, there were no other, cases, right around here or anything else.
Now, had you seen the horse fine one day and then find him down the next? Yep. and eviscerated? Okay, so it wasn't like, exactly. they're out wandering, and once in a while you'll go out and check the back 40, and there it was. So it could have been there for a week.
Like that,
okay.
Dave. The horses were in pens. The pens are, 5 feet tall. They're well enclosed. They even have a lock with a padlock and a chain around the gate on each pen. We lighted.
Well, I meant it more in the fact of, there's been some studies that believe that what happens to a cow is that they'll die of natural causes, and then nature goes into effect and will eat away the soft tissues around the genitals, the mouth, and the eyes.
Right.
So I didn't know if you're saying that usually takes quite a while to have happen. So I didn't know if you'd seen the horse one day, the next day it was like that, or could it have been out in there decaying for a while before you realized it? Was where I was going.
No, not at all. I mean, I see these horses on a regular basis every day.
All right, we have to take a break.
That's how it's always been.
We'll come back. John Edmonds, our guest this evening, as we talk more about his visitations with E.T. We're talking with our guest, John Edmonds. He is the owner of the Stardust Ranch, and he's been having a lot of strange activity. We've talked about the Skinwalker Ranch, Tim. Boy, was that in our first year, 2006?
Yeah, it was.
Colm Kelleher.
Colm Kelleher, right.
And I know we're trying to revisit that story with our buddy from Coast to Coast AM, and now my mind just went completely blank on his name, Tim. It is George Knapp. That's right. Yeah. Yes, because George is the co-author of that book.
Right.
And I know a lot of people have had an interest. This sounds like it. Are you familiar with the Skinwalker Ranch, John? And
I'm actually very familiar.
Okay.
And that gentleman actually visited our ranch.
Colm Kelleher?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. And what did he find? Did he say that this looks like the same kind of situation that he was dealing with on the Skinwalker Ranch?
Well, what had actually happened was that Robert Bigelow's team of investigators had been out here a year or so before he came out, and there was just general talk about it. But the team came out, they talked to us, took us out for dinner. We had a nice dinner, and they were interested in it, but there hasn't been any follow-up. So honestly, I don't know what he thought about it.
All right. Talk to me about this. When you acquired this property, what year was it?
I bought the ranch in 1996. We moved in June 1st, and from the very get-go, it started to be weird.
All right. Started now. That's all relative. Being out in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, would already make it weird for me. And I've seen the skies when you're out in Nevada or you're out in Arizona at night. Man, what a beautiful vista. I mean, just an amazing sky. There's no city lights to impede it. And I beg any of our listeners who have always lived in and around major cities, you owe it to yourself to go to some place like this and look at the skies. You will see it in an entirely different way. Maybe it's not quite as beautiful to you having to deal with what you're dealing with, but talk to me about your first experiences once you got there that you realized something was amiss.
Well, we had looked around for a couple of years, and it was hard to find some place that was really kind of far out of the city, but yet there was still a means of being able to go back into the city to go to work. And both my wife and I were professionally employed, working in behavioral health, and so we needed to be able to, get back into the city quickly and go to a regular job. This was about as far out as we were willing to go, so that we could still do that. But literally, the day that we moved in, the people that had been living here left all of their stuff behind, and we never saw them again. And I called the realtor that I bought it from, and I said, hey, bud, there's a problem here. I paid cash for this property, and guess what? Everything is still here. And he was furious, and he said, look, go out to eat, go to movies, go do whatever you can. Give me 5 or 6 hours. I'll find some way to figure it out and get them to move their stuff. And so that's exactly what we did. But we had all of our stuff in a rental truck, and we parked it on the property. And then we took one of our vehicles and we just disappeared for the day, hoping that when we came back, everything would be straightened out. Unfortunately, it wasn't. What we came back to was all of their furniture, all their personal belongings were in the pool. And this is a big pool. I mean, this is a 10-foot diving pool that's quite large, nice pool. And unfortunately, it was stacked up 3 to 4 feet out of the water with everything from appliances and furniture and you name it. And I was fit to be tied. I was glad they moved out, but that's not exactly moving out.
Well, John, you got to be careful what you ask for because you just may get it, just not in the way you want it.
Well,
you wanted that stuff out of your house.
And, I called the realtor, and he came over, and he saw it, took some pictures. He tried to get hold of the people, never got hold of them again, never heard another thing. And I ended up spending, the weekend dragging all this crap out of the pool and parking out in front of the property. And gradually people just, drove by and picked it up, and it disappeared. But the next thing that happened that was really, really strange
Well,
was
let me
that
reel
on
you
Monday,
back, John.
my wife went back to work.
John?
And, yes.
Real quick. So you assumed then that the family had just come and thrown it in the pool, or that...
We didn't know what to think. I mean, I know the realtor didn't do it. I mean, he was a little guy. There's no way he was going to pick up all this stuff and lug it out and throw it in the pool. Plus that didn't, end the problem, because then now it's in the pool and I'm still angry.
Right.
So, it doesn't get past anything.
Right. Well, I just know the clarification. People are going to be going crazy. Well, who did do it? So at that point, you still have no idea how it all got in the pool, but you're probably assuming the family or somebody did this, right? It's some kind of...
Well, it didn't make any sense. I mean, this is all nice stuff. I mean, it wasn't like a bunch of old junk. This wasn't stuff that you would, cart off to the Salvation Army. This was stuff that if you were going to get rid of it, you'd have a big yard sale or something and sell. These are nice appliances, washer, dryer, refrigerator, the whole works. You don't just lug them out and throw them in the pool.
All right.
And we paid them cash for the property, and
right.
They get their full asking price. So there shouldn't have been any issues between
no animosity,
us and them.
Okay. So you get the realtor in on this. They realize what's going on. You slowly get rid of everything out of the pool, and people come pick it up and take what you want, and it's all gone. What happens next?
All right. Well, on Monday, my wife goes to work. I stay behind, and I'm trying to arrange all the furniture and stuff that we moved out of the truck. And about, maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm kind of taking a break, and I see this man who is kind of a scraggly-looking, kind of just weird-looking guy, dressed in cutoffs, and he's got like a army shirt on with the sleeves cut off, and it's open, and he's got a T-shirt on underneath. He's got this great big machete on a piece of leather, and he's just kind of hanging it from his arm and slapping it back and forth, and just walking up the driveway. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I hope this guy's not my neighbor. And just look, long hair, real long hair, and just scraggly, kind of sunburn, just weird looking guy. And I walked outside, but before I did, I stuck a .357 Magnum down the back of my pants just for protection's sake. And I walked out, and I asked this man what he wanted. And I said, "Sir, you're on my property. What can I do for you?" And he looked at me, and he goes, "Well, who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm the guy that just bought this property." And he goes, No, I know the people that live here. They gave me a job. You see that building back there?" And I turned around and looked at what we call the tack room, which is about a 600 square foot building. And I said, "Yeah, that's our building too." And he goes, "Well, that's where I live." And I said, "Well, I'm a little confused. Nobody told me that you live back there. What's your responsibility around here?" And he goes, "Well, I'm the guy that kills the monsters. I'm the guy that keeps everybody safe."
At what point do you start reaching for that gun?
Well, yeah, at that point, my hand is kind of reaching back there to make sure it's there.
Right.
And I said, "Well, what monsters are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, you don't know about the monsters?" I said, "No, I don't know about any monsters." I said, "We're out in the middle of the desert. There's no monsters out here." And he just laughs and he shakes his head. And he says, "You'll find out." And I said, "Well, I got to tell you, I'm not in a position to pay anybody to do anything around here. I'm going to do it myself." And I said, "I really don't need your services, but if you've got your stuff back there in that building, why don't you go back there and pack it up? And I'll give you, a little while here to, get your stuff together, and, you can go down the road." And he just looked at me and he shook his head and he smiled and he goes, "You are going to be so sorry that you don't have me around here to protect you."
What? No, talk to me. What's going through your mind at that moment, John? I mean, first of all, this sounds like something from a cliche sci-fi horror movie. Are you thinking this guy's mad as a hatter and I just want him off my property? Or is any of this...
pretty much. I mean, Dave, I've worked a lot with vets, and there's
Right.
a large transient population of veterans from Vietnam on up here in Arizona. And I looked at him, to me, he just kind of looked like a vet that wasn't having a real good day. And he was the right age for it, and his eyes looked kind of funny, like, he just looked off. But I certainly wasn't willing to start out having my new dream property, with this guy on it. So he had to go.
Did you get any feelings?
Wandered off, and I never saw him again.
People said that and when you're in a certain environment, you can feel the energy, you can feel the weirdness. Had you had any feelings of that when you had been on the property at all?
You know what? I didn't, but my wife absolutely was creeped out by the property. And
from day one?
I was gung-ho about buying it because it was the right price. It was in an area that is absolutely gorgeous. It's surrounded by hills with saguaro cacti all over the hills. And quite frankly, it looks like the same kind of topography and just appearances that like Cave Creek or Scottsdale, and those prices over there are like, 8 times as much as what we pay over here. So I thought, man, I'm getting the greatest deal in the world.
So this guy packs up his stuff, and you never hear from him again. Our guest, John Edmonds, this evening, we're talking about the Stardust Ranch, his property, where apparently monsters roam, and they need a man on site to kill these monsters. Will John live to regret the decision of sending the monster killer away? We'll find out that and his own encounters when we return. But the day a scraggly-looking minor 49er dude comes walking up my driveway with a machete hanging from his arm and tells me his job is to kill the monsters.
On your property.
On the property I just purchased. My dream property.
Uh-huh.
Well, first of all, dream property is subjective. Me outside is not such a great place. But this, like I said, when he's saying this, can you not picture this movie? I'm picturing John Carradine. Remember creepy old John Carradine?
Right, yeah.
Walking up the path with the grizzled old miner, kind of skinny guy look with the machete in his hand.
See, I've got a disheveled Nick Nolte in my head right now.
He was talking more scrawny sounding.
Yeah.
I thought Nolte's is more drunk and big looking. But this guy, I'm just picturing him, the old John Carradine wagging that creepy bony finger saying, "You're going to regret sending me out."
Oh, God.
Right?
Yeah.
You got this sounds like a horror movie in the making.
Mm-hmm.
Our guest, John Edmonds, is talking to us about his experience on his ranch after he purchased it. You had never gone out to that tack building, John, to see if somebody, if there was anything left out there as well, so you had no idea this guy was taking up a home in that area?
Dave, I didn't. I'll tell you, this is the real weirdness of this whole thing. I was smitten with this property when I first saw it. I'd been saving for a horse ranch ever since I'd left Chicago, or actually left Evanston, Illinois, where I'm from. That was like since I was about 8 years old. And, I was like 35 when I bought this property. So I'd saved up a bunch of money. And, I took one look at this place and I said, man, for the money, this is a steal. And Joyce looked at me and she goes, don't you want to check it out first? And I said, what's it check out? It's a nice house. It's got a pool, it's fenced. It's got everything we need. It's got a tack room. It's got a big hay barn. It's got a guest house.
It's got a creepy caretaker that kills monsters. Yeah, you've got everything.
Of course, I didn't know about the monsters, but I got to tell you, I'm so bullheaded that even if I'd said that, if somebody, well, he did tell me there were monsters, but I mean, if he had been somebody that was more legitimate to me, it wouldn't have mattered. I'd have still bought it.
All right. You send your creepy caretaker away. He never returns. You've never heard or seen of him again, right?
No, I haven't. But I got to tell you, they found 48 bodies out here over the years. So he might have been one of them.
Wow. Okay, well, for a second there, you were leading us down a True Crime Tuesday path. I was afraid you were telling me that you found out this guy was hacking people up and burying them on the property.
No. Not on the property, but I mean, over the years out here,
Sure.
In this area, I've met a lot of sheriff's people, including Sheriff Joe Arpaio,
Sure.
and gotten to know these guys pretty well. And they've told me over the years that they found at least 48 bodies.
And anything strange about these bodies, or just drifters that met?
No, they never really got into it with me,
Okay.
but they just told me that be careful. And, I've always been well armed. I've always been somebody that, heck, I grew up in Chicago. It's like, man, you've got to be, semi-tough just to be able to, grow up there. But, to me, aliens, gang members, pretty much all the same stuff.
They're just throwing all different kinds of signs. Let's
That's about it.
let's move on then. So you've sent away your monster killing caretaker. How soon before stuff really starts to amp up and you realize maybe I needed a killer caretaker after all?
Well, Well, it wasn't too long after that. Literally, it was about maybe a week and a half to 2 weeks that we started seeing things on the property. First, we started seeing all these lights that we call golden orbs in the south sky at night. And they just look like big orange, like globes or orbs. They're always in groups of 3. They're absolutely perfectly motionless. I mean, you could balance a stick between 2 of them or 3 of them, and they just appear, and they last a few minutes, and then they blink out, or they move real quickly, and they move to a different spot in the sky. And we've been seeing those now for almost 20 years.
Are you anywhere near a military installation?
Well, Luke Air Force Base is 17 miles to the north of us, and west of us, another 15 or 20 miles, is the Goldwater Gunnery Range. But the thing about it is that we actually, I've taken hours and hours of these, video of these orbs and of other things out here. And there's a company here in town, Village Labs, and I actually sent the video over to them. They analyzed it, and they said, guess what? It is perfectly the same color and the same frequency and the same temperature as the Phoenix Lights. So that's a big tie-in because of the fact that, everybody says the Phoenix Lights were only here that one night.
Right.
They've been here forever.
Okay, so you've got now some corroboration that what you're seeing is not natural gas phenomena, not electric ball lightning. It's nothing of that sort. There is some kind of craft that is moving around in the skies near and around your property. That's right. And, we've actually gone out and determined how far away. It is exactly 17 miles from the property that we see these orbs. And we've seen them hundreds and hundreds of times. We've had lots of witnesses. Like I said, we've got video of it. And one of the really weird things about these orbs is that they actually have depth. You can actually look into them, and you see blackness in them. You see colors like green, red. They change colors. And it looks like there's something inside of them, or it looks like they're at least 3-dimensional. So, it's like almost like they're tunnels, like you're looking into something, and it's actually an opening to somewhere else. Wow, so like a portal or a time tunnel you're looking through. Yeah, in a way. It's weird, though, because it's opaque. It's not like real super clear. It's just kind of a murky color pattern inside of it. And again, we do have pictures of them actually changing and transitioning, and we have seen things go in and come out of them. That's what I was going to say. Have you seen any lights emitting from them or entering them? Now, what type of things go into them? Well, I can tell you one thing, and that is there's plenty of squadrons of F-16s and F-18s that go out there and chase these things all over the sky. And do you have videotape of them chasing those as well? I wouldn't say I have videotape of the actual planes because they're moving real fast, but you can tell, you can hear things, you can see the orbs appearing and disappearing and moving around. So you kind of, it's not like you see the tail numbers or anything on the planes, but it's pretty clear. I mean, it's pretty easy to infer what you're seeing. All right, but I mean, when you have got the plane zipping over, you've never caught the footage of the planes, the jet fighters flying towards these balls? No, they're too high up in the air. You can hear them and you can see them, but, with a video camera, it just makes them so small you can't see what they are. Oh, sure. All right, I understand. All right, so you see these portals. Now, do you start to notice on nights when you see the balls in the sky and you see these lights, does it coincide with physical beings on your property or weather patterns or any other kind of aspect that you can tie together? Yes and no. And I'll say that it sounds strange for me to say that, but I can't say that one causes the other. I wouldn't want to say statistically that there's a relationship between them, but it might be, we see the lights and then, 5 or 6 hours later, there'll be some kind of an occurrence on the ranch or in the house. So yeah, there might be some kind of relationship between them, but I don't want to jump to conclusions and say one causes the other. Listen to how calm he is, Tim. Right, he's just like, oh yeah, we see these lights, and sometimes things will happen on the property or in the house. It's so matter of fact. It's like you and I saying, oh yeah, we got those stupid Japanese beetles back in our house again.
Yeah.
And got to get rid of them. This guy's got aliens and beasties roaming about his property and home, and he doesn't sound affected. It's got to, after all of this time, it's got to kind of just feel like old hat to you, even though the rest of us listening would be terrified by this.
Well, I'm a clinician. I'm a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I have worked in some of the most exotic jobs that one can do in behavioral health, from working with, people that were serial killers to people that were, just really serious criminals. And, I used to be one of the guys that when something would happen here and they needed to have somebody go talk to like a shooter on the roof, I was the guy that went and talked them down. So, I've done some pretty radical stuff in terms of, facing danger. And I learned a long time ago that, you have to detach yourself from it. You have to emotionally separate yourself from the moment in order to be rational and in order to have, all your faculties in place so you can deal with it. And it just seems like the worse things get, the more rational I become.
Wow. Well, I give you a lot of credit, again, with what you're dealing with. Of course, we haven't really gotten into anything more than seeing some lights in the sky and jet fighters tearing off after these lights. What happens next starts to change your paradigm, I'm guessing, when you start to realize that it's not just in the night skies that you have to keep your vision, but as you alluded to, that things start to roam the property, things start to enter your home. We'll talk with our guest, John Edmonds, about that when we return. We've got to take a quick break. We've got so much more coming for you, right? Let's get back to it. John Edmonds, our guest, the Stardust Ranch, a location very much like the Skinwalker Ranch. So many different types of activity taking place there. John was just beginning to talk to us about these lights that would appear in the sky and almost seeming to be type of portals, jet fighters chasing after them. And how does it start to progress from just lights in the sky? I mean, are they ever flying directly over your property, lighting up your property?
No, not really. I mean, the jets fly over. We also had Apache attack helicopters. We've had, you name it. I mean, the military really has been, especially in the beginning years, was very prominent out here. When there was nobody else out here except our house, the military had a pretty strong presence. But that changed over time as it began to get a little bit more in terms of other houses and people out here, a few businesses out here. The military has pretty much, they're not as obvious anymore.
All right. Well, and it's not unheard of for the military to fly exercises over the desert areas. And as you said, I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere. So most of these places would be places that would be safe for them to fly over as opposed to flying over Phoenix, right? I mean, this is...
Yeah, but I mean, we used to get squads of these attack helicopters that would be, 60 to 80 feet off the road, and they would fly directly down the road and go south in the early evening. We had drone aircraft. When they were first developing the drones, literally I'd be out watering the horses and I'd be standing there with a hose, pouring water into a barrel. And, 30 feet behind me would be a drone aircraft. And it would just be literally hanging there. And see, I never knew that they could actually remain stationary. I thought they always had to remain in motion. But these things, they could just stop perfectly and hover like a dragonfly.
All right,
and I'd turn around and see the thing, and then it would zoom off.
You see these in the sky, and the fighter jets and the Apache helicopters. Was there ever any firefight, or was it just them seeming to be chasing something?
I never saw them launching any kind of weaponry. I didn't hear any, machine gun fire, cannon fire, or anything like that. It looked like they were just literally just trying to keep them in their sights and use them, something to be able to pursue. I think maybe they were given orders to not attack them because of the fact that, they couldn't hardly even keep up with them.
Have you ever contacted the military installations close by to ask, hey, just out of curiosity, what's with the helicopters going over?
Yeah, I did. I used to do a lot of reporting for something called the Cause website that was run by a guy by the name of Peter Gersten. And Peter Gersten was what they used to call the UFO lawyer. And so, I used to check out a lot of these stories, in this area. And, you know, the Air Force always, you know, it's always the same thing. No, you know, we're not going to acknowledge anything. There's nothing going out there. There's nothing going on. You know, nothing's leaving the base, blah, blah, blah. You know, so you never get a straight answer out of those guys.
I would think it would only behoove them to say, oh, yeah, we were just flying a low-flying military exercise. Sorry to have bothered you, sir. That would alleviate pressure and fears, right? I mean, because then you're like, all right, I understand. And if the government was smart, why wouldn't they do that and then just admit, you know, you have such a large portion of property around you that's unused desert, so we use that area as military test sites and you know, flies and do this for situations, so we've, you know, got it. No worries, sir. We'll alert you if there's ever a problem. That would, I would think, allay a lot of fears, right, for people in the area that might be experiencing something weird like this.
Dave, I think you answered your own question when you stated if the government was smart.
Oh, well, you get it here on Fox. That's right, folks. We've got more updates on the government that way. All right, you see these lights, you hear these things going on. When do you begin to, well, I guess, what is the next progression of activity that starts to sweep over your property?
Well, something I want to add to that real briefly, and that is I used to ride out as soon as I would see these orbs, because I was concerned. You know, people would say, "Oh, they're going to be like flares." You know, look for a parachute, look for, you know, stuff like that. I was scared to death they were going to set the desert on fire and burn everything down, and so I went out specifically to check that out. And none of these things ever came down on the ground. It never set the ground on fire. There were no fires. You know, so as far as being flares, no. So I just wanted to point that out.
And where you were seeing these orange balls and these lights in the sky, there's no chance that those were from a golf course and they were those party lanterns or anything like that was going up? Because I know the orange ball lights have been now debunked, as I'm sure you know, looking into UFO claims. A lot of people are putting up those little tea light balloons, if you will, and they look like an orange ball of light, and they'll go up in patterns of 2 or 3s, and they'll hang, and they'll kind of go on the same jet stream and float side by side, which a lot of people thought wasn't possible, but they've been able to recreate those experiments pretty easily. So you're sure that is not true?
These things are the size of a Greyhound bus. All
right. It just might be really big tea lights. Okay, so you've got these massive craft floating over. And again, do you hear anything at all? Is there a low humming, a droning noise? Anything from the craft, not the military craft, but from the UFOs?
No, nothing at all. I mean, they're perfectly silent. It's almost as if one dimension has been superimposed on another, because you can clearly see that there's activity going on with these objects, and that they are you know, they don't seem to be. It's like they're here, but they're not here. I don't know how to explain it. It's as if they're on fire. I mean, they literally look like they're on fire, but you don't hear anything, you don't smell anything, there's no residue, nothing.
Have you noticed in that case then, perhaps a lack of sound overall? I know some people have claimed that during UFO encounters, everything is silent. It's like you don't hear a dog bark, you can't hear a cricket chirp. It just suddenly, it's deadly.
That's true. That is very true. You know, I never thought of it until you said that, but there's absolutely no sound. In the desert, at night, there's a lot of sound. And when these things are active, there's nothing. I mean, you don't hear a breeze, or feel a breeze, nothing. Everything stops.
Oh, all right. Well, that's definitely something to consider as well. I know we've only got about 4 minutes left in this segment, but talk to me a little bit more about some of the other activity that started to amp up for you.
Well, what we started to see actually on the property is we started to see these large, what look like black or dark colored, they're human looking, but you can't see or distinguish any features walking around out in the desert. We started seeing them in the daytime, late afternoon. We started seeing them in the evening and at night. And Jimmy Church, he calls them Brillo men. So I guess they've been coined that now. But
he calls them what?
He calls them Brillo men because of the fact that they kind of look like giant Brillo pads, except they're in a human shape, and they have dimension to them in terms of, they're not like flat. They're not like shadows walking around, but yet they're kind of shadow-like. People have told me that maybe they're what they call watchers. I don't know. But we started seeing those out on the property and around the property, and literally these things seem to have absolutely no they're not restricted from like literally walking through solid matter, because we actually saw them start to walk through fences and gates, and these fences and gates are made out of metal, and they don't stop to open them or anything. They just walk right through them.
Wow. And you're seeing, I mean, do they come in clusters? Is it more than one?
No, just one.
Just
one at a time is what I always saw. My older brother was out here one time with his son, and they thought that they were going to hurt the horses, and so my brother pulled out a bone-handled pistol and just started shooting at it, and the bullets went right through it.
And again, no sound, but no aggressive nature back from them. It's not like they're throwing anything back at you, or there's no aggression from these beings, right?
Well, the thing about it is that we weren't terrified or anything, but we were perplexed, and a couple of times my dogs ran out. Excuse me, and literally tried to munch on one, and the dogs didn't. They got right up to them and they stopped about 7 or 8 feet away, and they wouldn't go any closer. So they perceived that there was some kind of a threat. But these Brillo men, they don't seem to be afraid of anything.
Okay. Creepy creatures. All right. You're still remaining pretty calm. Your brother's taking shots at them. Bullets are not penetrating or affecting them. Is there, at any point, are you thinking, you know what, maybe I move into town and I become a plumber?
Well, my wife she was pushing even harder the whole time. She's like, John, you moved us out to, some hellhole, and why did you do this to us? And it was starting to cause some negative energy in my marriage. And, I sat down with my wife and I said, look, Joyce, we spent a lot of money on this place, and you know what? There's bad stuff here, but, I think we can overcome it. We're strong people. We love God. We're faithful. We should be protected. This is a good test. Let's just stick it out. And, my wife just kind of put her hand over her eyes and walked back in the house and said, yeah, whatever. And, that's kind of how it's been.
All right, John Enben's our guest as we continue talking about the Stardust Ranch in Arizona, the property that he owns that seems to be a portal of lights in the sky and dark figures moving about his property and so much more. We'll find out all about that next. All right, John. Brillo men, dark shadows, lights over your property, a rift starting to happen between you and your wife. This is a lot of stress and pressure for a new property and a new beginning to something you've always dreamed of having.
Well, Dave, it really was, and it just, I kept trying to pass it off and just say, yeah, well, we live out in the middle of nowhere, and, when you're in a new place, you just kind of got to get settled, and hopefully things will get better, But I had called the phone company and asked them to come out and put in a phone for us, and they made an appointment, but then the guy didn't show up. And I thought, well, that's weird. So I called the phone company back, and, I kind of, gave them a hard time about it. And they said, we don't have anybody that will come out there. And I said, what do you mean? And I said, I'm within your catchment area. There's no reason why I can't have a phone. And they said, it's not the location in terms of where it is, it's the place itself. And I said, well, what does that mean? And the lady on the phone told me, she said, we can't get any of the workers to come out there. And I said, well, I got to have a phone. And I said, I'm entitled to a phone. I'm willing to pay for it. You guys have to hook it up. Otherwise, I'm going to have to bootleg it or something, and I don't want to do that. That's not legal. And so, finally, they made another appointment, and this guy showed up in a truck, and he gets out of the truck, and he is absolutely scared to death, shaking. And I'm like, I go out there and I'm trying to be friendly to the guy. Hey, do you want a bottle of water? What do you need? A cookie? I mean, come on. And the guy says, you don't know about this place, do you? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, do you know how much stuff has gone on this ranch? And I'm like, no. And he proceeds to tell me about the history of the ranch and the fact that they drew straws at the phone company to decide who had to come out here. And so that's how I ended up getting my phone.
So what does he?
But the guy,
yeah, what does he start to tell you?
The place.
Okay, and what is the history that unfolds when the phone company comes out there?
The people that built the ranch originally back in 1977, they literally just started with bare ground, and they built the buildings. And then when it was time to move in, the wife told the husband, "No way, not moving in there. Place is creepy. Don't want it. Going to get a divorce if you force me to move in there." And so the guy put it up for sale. And so he never even lived in his own house that he built. So his dream never was fulfilled either. And it just got crazier from there. The next people that bought it apparently were a family that was a family from Mexico that ended up running what they call it's an operation where they fatten up calves and they turn them into, cattle and then they sell the cattle. And that's, a traditional ranch. And they did real well with it. They made a bunch of money. They kind of put in more different attributes for a ranch. And I guess it did pretty well until one day the son sat down in the living room the day before his high school graduation, stuck a gun in his mouth, and blew his head off. So that had a real negative impact on the family, obviously.
Yeah, no understanding.
From there, I guess they fell apart and they moved.
No understanding of why the young man did that?
Nobody's ever been able to tell me any kind of answer. Nobody knew why. The kid was successful in high school. He was an athlete. Everybody loved him. And there's absolutely no good reason. And then the family just literally fell apart and lost the ranch after that. So the ranch ended up going to sale, and it was bought by a bunch of guys that turned it into a place for a militia. And so it kind of became, I guess, like a biker hangout. And, for a couple of years there, it was occupied by all of them. And they had run-in after run-in with the local police, the sheriff, and eventually they all got run off. And again, the place was empty. So then it was bought by people that... Go ahead.
When it was the militia headquarters, when they were the biker gang hanging there, was there any death or murder associated with the property at all at that point?
I don't know. I heard a lot of bad stories, but I was never able to, be able to confirm or deny any of them.
Okay.
Apparently after that, it was bought by some other criminals, and it was turned into a whorehouse, and it was also turned into off-street or off-track gambling. And the reason we know that, as the phone company guy pointed out, and that there's like 27 phone lines running into the property. And most people don't have 27 phone lines. So it was used for all sorts of weird stuff before we got it. In fact, the people that we bought the ranch from, apparently all they did was just buy it out of a bankruptcy and then turn around and, throw some paint on it and clean it up and, throw it on the market. And that's how we kind of fell across it. So we just kind of, we were in the right place at the wrong time.
Well, or the right place at the right time. I mean, this is a fascinating opportunity, and you find your dream location, you find a place to do what you've always wanted to do. I mean, certainly has a strange history to it, but when this guy is telling you about kind of the illicit history of it, this dark underbelly of the property, is he also talking about any of the other supernatural elements of the story?
No, he never mentioned that. He just said that everybody that lives out here knows this place. They kind of think about it like, Frankenstein's castle or something, where, it's that place. Don't go there. If your Frisbee flies over the fence, man, let it go. And that's how it's always been. And then when we came across it, we didn't know any of this. The realtor never told us. We just thought it was a cool place. And, I was like, yeah, that's the one I want. So I bought it.
Okay. It's absolutely bizarre. I mean, that's a lot of history to come into this kind of location with. And once you kind of had your eyes open to all that took place, and you start to realize that, everybody that's been there has had kind of an unstable atmosphere or violence and death, suicide, things like that. Is this at any time starting to make you feel like, well, you know what, maybe I should listen to the wife. Maybe we need to leave?
No, actually, it just made me that much more stubborn. I'm really, really bad about being stubborn. I mean, I just, like I said, I raised myself on the streets, and anytime anybody ever challenged me or gave me a hard time, I just fought them until I won. And to me, this was just another example of it. And I was determined. I was like, and I've been determined the whole time. I have never been anybody to get run off from anywhere. And I sure as heck was not going to let a bunch of little alien ET, so-and-sos run me off my own property.
But at this time, are you believing that it truly is alien UFO nature? It's not just military things going on?
Well, I actually, I started calling churches and asking people to come out here from the churches and check it out and maybe do like the equivalent of like a exorcism. And we had, folks come out here from the Mormon church because there's a lot of Mormon churches out here. And, really nice people. They came out here and actually they were so scared that they skedaddled out of the property in the middle of the ceremony. So, I mean, it's just one of those things. I tried to do everything that I could do, that I could humanly think of to find ways to try to either get more information or to try to combat what I felt was a negative force, that my wife was feeling was a negative force, that everybody else was telling us was a negative force on the property. And, it's really interesting because just recently I had a gentleman come out here that deals with ghosts and with spirits and all that, and he confirmed for us and even wrote a report. A guy by the name of Daniel Teague, who does Vega star healings, and he came out here and he said, John, you have as many ghosts on that property as most really old museums. You have over 500 ghosts on the property. At any given moment, you have at least 60 ETs, and you have 3 long-term resident spirits that live on that property with you.
Well, that might be time to start charging rent, John. I'm just throwing that out there. We've got Ascension Code. We'll continue talking about the Stardust Ranch, finding out more about the creepy history, the encounters they had. And at what point did John start to feel like there was something more malevolent and dark on the property? What was going on, and what were the encounters that began happening in his home? That's coming up next. You want this property. What was the dark side of the story? I mean, was there a malevolent nature to these things being around, or did it not really frighten you, but it was just more fascinating, the things that they were doing?
Well, I would tell you that in the beginning when I started seeing things, I actually thought it was kind of cool. I mean, I was like, wow, I bought this place and, we're seeing all these lights and stuff. And to me, it was just kind of like, it was real interesting. I was curious, and I thought maybe I'll get a chance to see a real UFO. Well, I had no idea that I was going to not only get to see real UFOs, but I was going to start dealing with ETs, like person to person, in my face. And the gray aliens literally began to show up here on the property, and you could see them. Now, I didn't know what a gray alien was. I didn't know what any kind of alien was. I never in my life ever wanted anything to do with the paranormal. I always tried to, whenever I came across anything that was paranormal, I always tried everything I could do to try to explain it away, find a rational reason, the whole works. And literally, we started seeing these beings on the property in the house, and they were terrifying. And I wasn't terrified, but my wife was terrified, and I was very upset that she was terrified. And there was no way to communicate with them. They literally would just show up either in the master bedroom late at night. They would show up on our sun porch. We just started seeing them. And
describe them to me. How tall were they? How fat, skinny? What did they look like?
Big head, big black eyes, tiny mouth, little nose, skinny neck, anywhere from 4 feet to almost 5 feet. They have long fingers, but not human-like fingers. Feet, but not like normal feet. No real clothes.
And how do they move about? I mean, do they walk like you and I, or do they float? Do they fly? Do they just seem to transport from one spot to another?
They literally seem to, I know they can move like normal, like bipedal locomotion, but they don't really seem to do that. They just kind of move from place to place, almost as if they're displacing, the area that they're in, and they just go to the next area. And that was one of the ways that actually made it kind of easy for me to interact with them when it became time to literally have conflict with them, was because I would just predict where they were going to be. It was like somebody throwing a football, and I just had to meet the football. So I got to the point where I could tell where they were going to be approximately, and I had a samurai sword given to me by somebody, and they said, sounds to me that's the best way to deal with them. You live in a brick house, so you don't want to be shooting things, and have to worry about bullets bouncing off. Stick with a samurai sword or a baseball bat. So I got both of those, and I kept them handy. They were very effective.
Well, it doesn't, and I know we're going to get into that aspect of the story later, but doesn't it seem weird that these creatures can come from wherever they are, they can enter your home and move about freely, do these things, but they're susceptible to a bullet, a knife, or a baseball bat?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's actually a gentleman by the name of Robert Michael Collins who did a great analysis of how they move that's actually available on several different websites. And, he actually talks about the physics of it. He's actually observed these creatures himself, not on our property, but on a different location in Ohio. And, he knows exactly how it works. So that information is available, but it's pretty technical.
You see these moving about in your house. Your wife is witnessing this. They're coming and going. Do you have any physical altercations with them?
Well, and that's what ended up happening, was that my dogs at the time tried to attack. They always show up in threes, by the way. They never show up one at a time. And my dogs, I had Rottweilers at the time, and they actually went after one of these creatures. They pulled it down on the floor and started to just tear into it. One of them just literally was standing there watching the whole thing, and the other one I ended up running through with a samurai sword. And literally, I gutted the thing to the point where the sword went right through the body and went right into the wall behind it. This brownish fluid started spurting out. And when I removed the sword, there was a piece on the end of the sword the size of like a big grapefruit. And that's what ended up being sent to Grass Lakes, Michigan, to Dr. Levengood for analysis.
What happened to the being once you run it through with a samurai sword? Does it drop to the ground and die? Does it disappear? Does it get up and slap you and walk away? How does it react?
They literally, unless you take the head off, they disappear.
Really? So you have to behead the creature in order to not lose it or have it vanish?
Correct.
And
they seem to, if you remove the head, you get to keep the prize.
It's like the Predator here.
I guess. I don't know about that, but yeah.
Okay. So you've run this thing through, it left a chunk of itself. Why do you think if it all vanished, why do you think part of it would be left behind?
Well, I was on the end of my sword, and my sword was in another room by that point.
Oh, okay. All right. So you think because of what had happened and that it was separated from the body far enough that when the body disappeared, it just left that part behind it.
Yeah, I immediately took the sword, and I ended up taking a plastic bag, several plastic bags actually, and I grabbed it and pulled it off the end of the sword and immediately put it into a glass bottle and stuck it in the freezer.
With the idea of doing what with it?
Well, I didn't really know. I figured that, everything I was trying to do, and I've always tried to do with this entire set of experiences, was to treat it clinically so that I could have some kind of proof, because everybody's got great stories, but if you don't have proof, that's all they are, is stories.
Exactly, right. So you've got that going. You've now taken a piece. You've got this stored away. When they appear, are they only appearing as one, or are they appearing multiples?
Well, like I said, they always appear in threes. I've never seen them unless they were in threes. And they used to appear in our master bedroom sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. And they began to do bad things where literally we'd wake up and we would find that there were holes in us and there was fragments of skin and tissue being removed from us. There was blood being removed, all sorts of things. And then that even got worse because they started actually assaulting my wife. And that's when, I went over the top on that one. I literally walked in to the room. My wife, because she goes to work so early in the morning, she has to go to bed usually by like 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at the latest. And when I went in to go to bed, it was about 11:30 at night, and there were three of them in the room. My wife was levitating about 3 feet off the bed, and they were touching her and trying to do things to her. And I grabbed the sword, and I just literally cut them to ribbons.
And is that when you learn that by beheading them, you get to keep the prize?
That's right.
So you beheaded one of these aliens.
That's right.
And you've got the full carcass and remains?
I do not. It was removed from the property, and at this time it is out of state. Let's just put it that way. I'm really not, until I'm given permission to say so. I can't really say where it is.
But you're in control of it.
It's not on American property, even though it is in the continental United States.
Okay. Now, but you're the one in control of it. It wasn't taken from you. The aliens didn't come collect it and flip you off and take off in their UFO. You took responsibility for this body and where it went.
That's correct.
Okay. And I know you're not at liberty of exactly saying where it's at, but we've got about a minute and a half left in this segment. Can you tell us what conclusively can you tell us about this find? Who the organization or people that have it, are they able to determine what it is, where it is, how old it is, anything like that?
In terms of what's really strange in that is that Dr. Levengood and his wife, after they received the information, within a very short time after that, about 6 months later, both of them mysteriously died.
Wow. Now I'm wondering about doing the rest of this interview, Tim. I'm going to have you walk me to my car. That's chilling. We'll talk about that. We'll explore more of that aspect of the story. We'll continue to talk about the other aspects. And when we come back, I've got a couple of harder hitting questions for you, John. I don't want people to think I'm snowballing you the whole time here and or softballing you the whole time and just buying into everything blindly. There are some things I just need to know, and especially, I know you've kind of covered some of these points through the last hour and a half that we've had together. But, there just seems to be some very strange aspects of this, and I'm wondering, do you feel that they were manipulating or changing you? Were they making you stay on this property, making you feel this allure and this attraction? Was it because they were actually the ones in control? And once you start taking out these aliens, how do they start to respond? I would guess, as you said, they'd already come back and assaulted you and your wife numerous times. At what point is it time to maybe look at getting out of this property? The Stardust Ranch, that's our topic this evening, a skinwalker-like situation. Our guest, John Edmonds, when we return. When they begin physically and perhaps even sexually assaulting you or your wife, is it not time to burn the ranch to the ground and get the hell out of Dodge?
Well, it might have been.
I understand being stubborn.
When you got horses and you've got well over $1 million in the place, no. It just, I wasn't willing to let go. I was not willing to, all these horses that came here and have been here were abandoned, and I made a promise to God that I would take care of them and that I would stand, be a good American, be a good man, and that I was not going to back down under any circumstances. And I was going to depend on my faith, and
Well, let me ask you.
I was going to do it.
Let me ask you a hard question there, then. And I know I'll piss off a big portion of our audience doing this, but you and your wife are being accosted, molested, experimented on by these aliens. Where's your God during all of that? Where is God helping and protecting from those kind of attacks? And trust me, I come from a Christian perspective. I believe, but it's in those situations where you think, I'm leaving it into faith, and I'm going to believe in God. He seems to have already failed you at this point. You're being
I've never felt that way.
Hurt
You know,
and
Dave,
touched.
I've never felt that God's ever failed me. I always felt that God made me strong enough to be able to stand against any, darkness or any kind of threat, and to, prevail. And so far I have. So I don't feel like God's ever walked away from me. He's had my back the entire time.
Prevailing is winning out, and them not being able to do these things to you against your will. They're doing things to you, medically testing you, and maybe other sexual things to you. That doesn't seem like protection to me.
Well, the way I looked at it was this, and that was that what we were going through was something that not necessarily that we needed to go through, but somebody had to live through these experiences and come out the other side to talk about them and tell the story, and to be able to say that no matter what happens to you, if you depend on love, if you depend on being sacred in your marriage and good in your faith, that you can stand against anything. And I truly believe that America's that great.
Well, that's fantastic. I give you a lot of credit. I don't know many people, myself included, that could have that kind of strength, that at that point I just don't feel like it's either time to pull up stakes and get out of there, or questioning my complete faith system. And how does that affect you? I mean, talking about the faith system and aliens, up until recently, it was not real, popular a theory to believe in aliens. It was only within the last 7-8 years that the Catholic Church has opened up and said, it's probably not a sin to believe in life elsewhere anymore. How are you rectifying it with your faith and belief in God, that there is more going on? There's no book of Mork. There's no book of this alien race. There's no telling of that in our understanding of the Bible. But yet here it is.
I'll tell you what, Dave, I used to pray and I'd say, Lord, I'm really, really sorry that I brought my wife here and that this happened. What do I do? And I kept praying on it and praying on it. And the more I prayed on it, the more that came back is use what you got. And at first I was kind of ticked off about that. But then I said to myself, well, if you're getting that message, John, it means that there's something inside of you as far as your character goes and your strength, or in your relationship, or something on the ranch, or that you have some kind of knowledge that you know how to do, that you should be able to fix this thing or work it through somehow. And I began to reach out to the UFO community. I began to reach out in general, trying to get some kind of answers about, what I should do. Of course, everybody said the same thing, get the hell out of there and move. But the bottom line is that, like I said, I didn't have the money to replace this ranch. And it's not like I could put it on the MLS and say, hey, I got, alien Disneyland here, coming by my ranch. So, and I literally did try to sell it 2 or 3 times, and, people just did not want to pay what I needed to get out of it to be able to do that. So, I figured, man, I'm stuck. I sent my wife a few times to go stay with her family, which she did when things got really bad. November 10th of 2000, we had an electrical fire on the property, and it burned the place to the ground. We had just bought a brand-new freezer from Montgomery Ward's right before they went out of business, and within 2 weeks after we had it plugged in, we had an electrical fire, and it went up through the roof, and it burned the place to the ground. So now I was in a position where I had to deal with getting a settlement from the insurance company, rebuild the ranch. And, the APS, the power company, came and took the meter off the property before even the fire people got here to put out the fire. So I had no way to pump water for my horses, and, I had to find a way to deal with that. I had to deal with people that literally showed up that just wanted to pick through the rubble and see what they could find. It was tough, My wife ended up staying with her family, and I ended up literally living in the back of my pickup truck for a long time until I could figure out a way to get some kind of shelter built so that we could be back together and stay here and, rebuild the ranch. But it took, better than 2 years to get us to that point.
During that time, you're on the property. You're no longer shielded by a house. You're in the back of a pickup truck. Are there still things going on, or does it ever subside? Does it ever lull for a short time?
Well, in terms of seeing grays, I didn't see any. I mean, it was as if when the house burned down, they just said adios, and that was it for that. But we still saw a lot of lights. We still saw ships. I still saw, giant black triangles. At one point, I got within 65 feet of one of these triangles out in the desert. I was chasing after a dog that had gotten off the property, and literally I got so close to this thing that I could feel like an electric kind of hum, to the point where in my mouth I felt like I had pennies in my mouth. It was this like metallic taste. All the hair on my body like stood up, and it was pretty intense. And then before I could go home and do anything to get a video camera or anything else, like I just seemed to like black out, and I lost all this time for over an hour. When I came to, I was standing there in the same place, but now I had the video camera hanging from my shoulder. It was turned on, but there was nothing on it. So during that period of time there, I have absolutely no idea what happened.
Have you gone in for regression therapy to try to recapture some of these memories?
I actually did. I started going in for regression, actually even long before that, after we first got out here and started going through a lot of this stuff. And I do have those tapes. I'm not really right now in a position where I want to talk about those. I'm kind of looking at those as maybe, possible book subjects later on.
But in that case, when you're having these regressions, did you explain to the hypnotherapist what you were there for, or did you just say, I just want to be regressed, I want to try to remember the aspects of this day and see what happens, so that you weren't front-loading the therapist, they weren't front-loading you?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what we did. We literally did about 30 or 40 hours of regression, and most of it was recorded. So, yeah, there was no, I didn't just go in there and say, hey, I'm having all this stuff go on, and I need to know what it means. I told the man that there were things in my life that were causing me to have a lot of stress and anxiety, and I wanted to try to work them out and find out what was going on. And so he was very good about it.
So this therapist,
all the way through it.
This therapist thinking maybe drugs, alcohol, marital dispute. What's his reaction when it's you're being beamed up and or being experimented on home by aliens? How does he react to this?
He was kind of blown away, but it was interesting because he had a long history of working with people that had actually gone through experiences similar to this. He was somebody that had come out of the Army, and he had many years of dealing with traumatic PTSD type of events with clients. And so, yeah, he was pretty freaked out by some of the stuff that happened, because while he was doing the sessions, a couple of things happened during the sessions.
You can't tease us, John. Can you give me a little taste of what happened during the sessions?
I'll just tell you that literally things began to fall off the walls, and his office was never the same, and I never left the chair.
And he wanted to keep seeing you after that.
Oh, he was fascinated. I mean, he actually got it to the point where when he was teaching classes to some of the major doctors that were here in Maricopa County, he had me come in, and I was his subject to teach how hypnotherapy worked and, how powerful it could be. And so we actually, there were actually incidents that happened during those sessions as well.
You talk about Maricopa County, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, very famous for that area, and having, I think, that tent city jail system kind of thing going on there. You've spoken to him, you know him. Has he any idea of your story, and has he ever related any kind of weirdness going on in the desert for those inmates?
No, I mean, I know Joe. I've known him for many years, but I'm not like his buddy or anything. So we have never actually, had that discussion. He's got his hands full just dealing with all the rest of the stuff that goes on out here. He doesn't need all the garbage that's, come off this ranch.
Right, I was just curious if those people would be, the criminals and inmates would have been affected by similar situations if you're in that same county. We need to take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got more to discuss with our guest. What a story. What an amazing story. And I may never go to Arizona again, Tim. I'm fair warning. Arizona might be on the let's not go there list.
I may not either.
All right, let's take that break. We'll be back with more right after this. This is every alien nightmare you could imagine rolled into one tidy little Arizona-laden ball. We were talking about you're located in Maricopa County in Arizona. Your Stardust Ranch is out there. You've had all these strange experiences, and I brought up the fact Sheriff Joe Arpaio is well known and has that tent city kind of set up for inmates. and has certainly made a name for himself as being one of the toughest sheriffs in the world. You said that you haven't really spoken to him about this, but have other people and residents of the area, maybe even some of the past inmates, ever talked to you or approached you about these kind of situations and stories?
Indeed, they have. I explained earlier that I'm a therapist, I'm a social worker, and a counselor.
Right.
And one of my jobs was to go out as part of some diversion therapy and go to people's homes all over this area and provide counseling and to provide services. And I would run into people that had these stories all the time. Now, the thing is that I couldn't tell them about my experiences because that would have been unprofessional to bring myself into that therapeutic situation and trade stories with them. But I did get a chance to hear a lot of stories from people that they had seen things out here. And, you know, the whole time that I'm dealing with all this stuff on my ranch, I'm trying to, you know, work 40, 50, 60 hours a week as a counselor. So, you know, it was very difficult for me to be able to, you know, maintain that professional rapport without allowing some of my stuff to bleed over onto theirs. But I always managed to do it. I thought that was critical. Eventually, in 2008, I ended up retiring from the counseling profession because of the fact that I thought I'm going to have to expose this. I'm going to have to, you know, go to the next level. And I don't want my counseling profession and my professional practice to be affected by it. And so I did retire from the profession completely.
Knowing what you know about how the mind works, how people work, how the influence of ideas and perceptions can affect others, like you just mentioned, you didn't want to superimpose your thoughts, beliefs, or experiences onto theirs. So you just had to remain objective and let them report what they were doing. I mean,
that's correct.
You've got this stuff going on in your life. Is there at any point you're thinking, maybe I need medication? Maybe I need to look at what's going on in my life, and is stress getting to me that I'm seeing and thinking I'm experiencing these things?
Yes and no. I never thought I needed medication. I really don't believe in medication. I'm a person that believes there are many other ways that are much better to dealing with emotional issues or psychiatric issues than with medication. I think medication, honestly, all it does is dull the senses, and it doesn't teach you a way to deal with anything. All it does is create a fog that you seem to survive through day to day. But I don't really think, for the most part, that it does that much to help anybody. So, no, I never felt like I needed medication. What I felt like I needed was clarity. And, you know, I was already being able to discern the difference between, you know, any kind of fantasy and reality, even though it was, you know, kind of a fine line at times here. You know, but I felt like I never felt like I didn't have a good grip on things. You know, my wife, she got very depressed over this. And as time went by, we found out that the exposure that she had to these ETs caused her to have, unfortunately, a fatal diagnosis. And she is now being treated for that fatal diagnosis, which was made through the Mayo Clinic here in Arizona, and she's getting better. But, you know, I'll tell you what, my wife has paid dearly for it. I have spent a lot of years apologizing to her and trying to make up for it. But you know what? In the long run, she saw my point of view, she accepted it, and she's worked with me as a wonderful woman and as a wonderful wife to be strong and to work through, you know, to some kind of resolution. So I give her all the credit in the world.
We've heard on other shows and conspiracy theory shows that there are elements at work, whether it's shadow government agencies, big business, other independent corporations that seem to have this technology that is very invasive and can create hallucinogenic moments, can create physical ailments, and impede your thoughts, impede your memory, impede your visual sensory perception. And when you're referring to UFOs that you see in the sky, that all other senses seem to shut down. You're not hearing anything. There's nothing else going on. It all seems to be silent. You're having these visions. You're seeing these things. Creatures are coming in. Is there ever any research that you've done into this domestic terrorism idea that maybe the government is just guinea pigging and creating these experiments with you and your family?
We thought all that might be possible, but I'll tell you what, in 2001, I was diagnosed with rapid onset MS. And I went literally from having no symptoms to having severe symptoms to literally going into Barrows Neurological and being tested and having MRIs done. And they said that I had plaque on the brain, and I had what looked like some kind of an object at the center of the brain. And they thought that, the guy literally asked me for my driver's license, took it away from me, and said, "You're never going to drive again." He said, "You better get ready to die. I'm very sorry to tell you that, but you better make out your final will and make arrangements." And I went back to see this gentleman that was the therapist, the hypnotherapist, and he recommended that I meet with him and with an individual that he was going to introduce me to a few days later. I met with that individual. That individual scanned me, looked me over, checked me out, and said, "I need you to come to my office." And I went to his office a couple of days later. I went through a healing, and literally within 3 weeks after that, I went back to Barrows Neurological, had another MRI, and came back, and they said, "It's a miracle. You're totally healed. You no longer have this." And the guy gave me back my driver's license.
Wow. So who do you think interceded on your behalf? Do you believe that it was the alien race had stopped doing what they were doing to you, or that they healed you, or do you think it was your faith?
Well, actually, I think it was a combination of things, but literally the gentleman that I was introduced to used a form of technology that literally he had me sit down in his office. He gave me this large ball. It looked like almost like a crystal ball, except that it had all this gold stuff in it that looked like tinsel. He told me to relax and told me to look into the ball. And after a few seconds of looking into the ball, suddenly it felt like I was inside the ball, looking out of the ball. And I felt this warm, almost like flowing, like water, warm water flowing all over my body. And he explained to me that what was happening is that the gold inside the ball was being literally was going into my body, and that it was healing the areas along the neural paths that had been exposed to this MS problem, and that it would heal me. And it took about 30 minutes, and at the end of it, he just said, "Okay, close your eyes, open your eyes." I opened my eyes. I was back outside the ball. I was sitting there in the room with him and my wife, and literally I felt better. And he looked at me and he said, "I don't think you're going to have any more problems, but I want you to come back in a week for a checkup." I went back in a week. I had one more MS type of attack where I had these terrible electrical shocks to my body that literally would throw me on the floor. And that was it. And it's been now, all these years, 14 years later, and it's never come back. And so I began to really believe in the power that there was other technology that was out there, that there were ETs out there that were good ETs, and that energetic healing could become a means to be able to cure just about anything.
All right. Now, I know with that being said and the listener base that we have, I'm going to be inundated with emails begging for information on who that person is and how to get that kind of therapy. Is that something that you can share as well?
I can actually do that, because I'm actually now working with that individual. With an individual, actually. It's not the same individual, but it's another person that does the same kind of work. The original person is no longer doing any kind of work like that at all. He's off doing other things. But there's a gentleman by the name of Christopher Macklin. That's Macklin. He is out of Branson, Missouri, and he does the same kind of healing. And it's fabulous. He does like 30 of these healings every single day of the week. And he does them by phone, he does them by Skype, he does them in person. However is necessary to get it done, he does it. I can give you actually his website, which is www.christophermacklinministries.com.
All right, and
we'll even give you a phone number.
We'll put up the link, and I'll tell you what, we'll do this off air. We're talking about his property known as the Stardust Ranch. property where he has not only seen and witnessed lights and UFO craft in the sky, but has also witnessed beings, creatures, from dark, shadowy, Brillo-like figures moving about his property to 3 of his horses being mutilated over the period of a year and a half, to encounters with grays inside his home, both physically, aggressively, and perhaps even sexually assaulting him and his wife repeatedly. This having a deep impact and effect on their physical and mental nature. John, this is a story unlike any other I've heard, and very much like the Skinwalker Ranch, but it's so much more personal with what's going on with you and your family. You've got ET activity, you've got these creatures, you've got lights, you've got ghosts. I mean, you have come into what's like a paranormal nexus of activity, just this property that's ripe with all types of different things going on. Let's
Dave, that's a real good description, and as I kept trying to reach out, we were getting to the point where we were sort of literally at the end of our ropes. I mean, it was more and more looking like maybe it was just time to, just give it up and get the heck out of here. But, every time we've been, just right to the very edge of, giving in, God has sent us some kind of an answer or a solution or something to take us, to a little bit better place. And indeed, that's exactly what happened this time as well. In 2011, we had a lady that's a doctor here in Phoenix come forward, and she said, I can bring some ETs that are positive ETs to your ranch, and we can have a meeting and see if there's something that we can do to control or end all of this activity. And I was pretty skeptical at first because at that point I'd only met one really positive ET, but the fact that he'd already healed me from MS, I thought to myself, well, if he's good, maybe there are some other ones out there that are halfway decent. And so I agreed to the meeting, and she brought out these 2 members of the Syrian command, literally, and ended up bringing out, there were several other groups, Pleiadian, Andromedan. All of them came out to the ranch, and actually only 3 of them came out with her physically. The other ones literally appeared in my home as we were holding the meeting.
When you say appeared, were they appearing in a physical form, or were they?
Yes.
Or were they a holographic
they literally
form?
just kind of like beamed in. It was like one moment they were there, or they weren't there, and the next minute suddenly I had a house full of these individuals, and I was like, wow, how'd you guys get here? And they just kind of looked at me and smirked like, well, we don't drive around in SUVs. We got a big spaceship. And I was like, all right, well, that's pretty cool. Could we see the spaceship? And indeed, later on, when the meeting was over, we went outside, and we saw a spaceship that was a flying saucer that was like the size of a big NFL stadium in the sky. And my wife and I just looked at each other, and we were just blown away. And
I've got to ask, just out of curiosity, you're in front of all of these aliens. You're having this United Nations of interplanetary characters appearing in your home to have this meeting, and you ask if you can see the UFO. Do they look at each other and roll their eyes like, oh, humans? Or
yeah, kind of. I mean, it was a real rookie mistake at the time, I guess. But you know what? I mean, I'm a guy. I'm just a regular person. It's like,
right.
What do you? I needed some proof.
Sure.
I mean, for all I knew, these guys were just hoaxing me.
But they beamed into your living room, John. How do you beam into the living room as a hoax?
Well, I thought maybe somebody let them in. They just showed up and somebody let them in. I mean, I was trying to find any kind of rational explanation for the things that I was seeing.
I understand.
And I couldn't figure out anything, so I kind of had to go with what they were telling me. But they had brought things with them in terms of, samples from other places in terms of, like, valuable ore. I mean, at one point they had, like, what looked like a block of gold that was a large block of gold. And that's not like something that anybody would just walk around with. I mean, it was a big block. They had these various different stones that whenever you touch them, they'd light up or they would turn hot, they'd turn warm. They had all sorts of things. And, I sat there for about 3 hours with my wife, and we just asked one question after another, and they gave us good answers. Now, the fact that they were all wearing swords kind of bothered me. And I thought, man, this is really kind of strange. I wasn't afraid of them, but I thought, well, I got a sword, they got a sword, I guess that's cool. So at the end, when we went out, my wife and I sat outside on this, the bed of my pickup truck. I've got a red F-350 pickup truck, and I was sitting on the bed with her, and we're watching these guys stand there with these swords, 3 people with swords up, pointed in the air, and that's when this giant monster spaceship came out of the clouds. It was just like boiling clouds. It went from a beautiful July, sunny, hot day in Arizona to all of a sudden we were having black clouds. There was lightning, there was thunder, there was rain, not just a little bit of rain, but torrential rain out of blue, just like it came out of nowhere. And in the south sky, the entire south sky was orange, and there were literally dozens of other ships.
Where are the fighter jets? Where are the military helicopters and craft? You've got this conglomeration of craft hanging over your property. Why is nobody scrambling a jet to come check on it?
I have no idea. Believe me, I was not in a position after I'd spent 3 hours with these guys to be asking a whole lot of really, good, logical, rational questions. I felt like a little kid. I was just like living in the second. I couldn't even live in the moment. It was the second because it was so intense. And my wife and I just looked at each other and we're like, oh my God. And then when the lightning came down, there was this huge crack or peel of lightning that was orangish purple, and it came down right behind these guys. Note to self, don't stand out in a lightning storm with 3 swords sticking up in the air. Bad idea. And the lightning hit right behind this woman on the ground, and apparently it came up through her shoes, and she got actually charged by it. Now, I didn't know that until about last Thursday or Friday, because I had not spoken to her or had any contact with her in 4.5 years. And after the interview with the Project Camelot interview, somebody gave her the interview, the contact information for me, and she said, that's my story. That's my story. That's the same people that I went out to their ranch. And she immediately called me, and we reconnected. And this last Sunday, I had a reunion with those people in Phoenix.
And was the idea that they were going to she brought the good aliens to try to talk on your benefit and stop the abuse and the aggression and things that were going place? Is that what was going on?
Yeah, that was exactly what was going on. They did ceremony here in the house, and they literally started running some of these things out of here. And at the same time, some of them just gave up and disappeared. And so things got a lot better after that. I mean, compared to what they were, I wouldn't say the whole thing's over with, but it really slowed down.
Did they explain?
The aggression behind the Grays pretty much stopped. Did
they explain why your property was such a hotbed?
Apparently, this property has something they call fulgurite, which is a mineral, and that mineral is valuable and it's useful. It's charged with electricity from lightning, and this is apparently because they call it Rainbow Valley. They have a lot of storms here, and the storms kind of go around in a circle. There's a lot of lightning here. And apparently the property is charged with this stuff. And I'd never even heard of it before. I'd never even seen it or anything. I didn't even know about it until this last weekend. And when the doctor handed me a piece of this stuff, I said, oh, I know what that is. Yeah, we get tons of that stuff out there. And apparently that is one of the attractions. The other attraction is that our property sits on one of the largest aquifers in this part of the state. And the water that comes from this property apparently is special in some way.
Oh, really? So you've got quite a bit, but you have underwater or underground water there.
Yes, we have a big well here, and I mean I can turn on 20 taps and still get anywhere from 30 to 60 gallons a minute out of all of them at the same time.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. You've got a lot of things that would make it seem conducive for being a portal or an area of energy, just in a natural environment. You've got all these aliens that come forward and talk to you. I mean, do they look any different than you and I? Have they got 4 eyes, 4 fingers, anything that would differentiate them from our human forms?
Not really, except that the 2 of them that I remember very specifically were quite large. I mean, they look like they should have been, playing on an NFL team. They're just really big, strong, real healthy looking people.
And are they living here amongst us?
According to them, and I can't say this that I've confirmed it, but apparently Phoenix is an area that is it's a hotbed for ETs. They've been here for a long time, and they are here regularly. Arizona, for some reason, is very attractive to them. And, we have Sedona here. We have lots of different areas throughout Arizona that apparently have these gates or portals. And it's a very sacred place.
Did they give you any idea of what the tests were that these other aliens were running on you, and if that was what was causing issues in your life? No, we never really got into that. They just, pretty much I had always believed the same thing, that it wasn't confirmed, but it also wasn't really discredited, and that is we just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's this ranch. It's not about us. The fact that I, stood up to them and I fought them, and that I've always, tried to, use my Second Amendment rights, and I believe in the Constitution real hard. I just don't back down. This is my ranch. I guess that just made it that much more the fact that we were going to get a double, triple dose of, alien backlash. We talked about the dark figures. We talked about some of the grays. What type of activity? I mean, have you had cryptid creatures, Bigfoot or other creatures that maybe we are not familiar with or don't have names for, that have appeared on your property?
We have seen, there's been literally hundreds of examples of strange stuff. I mean, we've had UFOs that flew over, and then a few minutes later we saw kangaroos running down the road. So I don't know how that one works, but it's pretty strange. I'm thinking maybe some kangaroos got abducted over in Australia, and they figured that Arizona, where we are, is kind of like, Australia, so they let them out or something. I don't know. I mean, there's just lots of weird stuff. We never, it's every single month there's something new. Years ago we had what looked like a power storm. We had a real bad power failure, and then we had what looked like 2 Roman soldiers walking directly through the house, one with a Roman sword in his belt, another one with a big spear, and it was like in black and white, like a movie. It just literally, here we are, my wife and I are sitting in the sofa. It's totally black in the house because of the power failure. We hadn't even had a chance to reach for a flashlight, and the next thing you know, you see these 2 guys just walking through the house, and they had no consciousness that we were there. We just saw this like it was a black and white movie being, shined in the living room, only in 3D. And they went in one wall. They came in from the back wall. In the back of the house, they walked through talking. You could see, trees and like literally, it was just like a movie of seeing images from another time and another place. It's just bizarre.
And could you hear anything, or was it just a visual?
No, it was visual, and we could hear voices. I mean, literally, it was just like a new reality superimposed in our reality. But they had no understanding of where they were other than where they were. It's not like they were experiencing anything strange. Wherever they were doing their thing, they were in their time, and they were experiencing exactly what they expected to experience. We were just the ones that had a chance to see them in our living room doing it. They literally just walked right through the wall and just disappeared.
And earlier you told me that there was a tragedy that happened there with one of the children that lived in the location prior to you having committed suicide. Was there ever any ghost-like activity that took place at the house that would lead you to believe that that energy or that spirit might still linger as well?
Yes, and honestly, we still are having problems with that. We have food that disappears. We have, personal items that they're there 1 second and all of a sudden they're gone. And then, I get pretty upset when that happens because usually it's like car keys or a wedding ring or a wallet or something like that. And, if I bitch hard enough, all of a sudden within a few minutes, it'll just literally just drop right out of the air and fall on the ground.
Would you say that there is activity that takes place there still on a daily basis?
I don't know if I would say daily, but I would say every few days. Usually it comes in little batches, particularly annoying. I mean, in the summertime, there's been times I'd be sitting there watching a movie or something, and a water bottle on a table nearby will lift up, 7 or 8 inches and just rotate in the air right next to the sofa where I'm sitting. And it didn't happen just once. It's happened, many times. And my wife will just sit there and look at it, and I'll look at it. And it's almost as if they're saying, hey, we're here. We want you to know that we're here. We've had dogs picked up and literally floated across the room and then set down on the other side. Just lots of, small examples like that.
But you no longer feel the kind of threat or impending malevolence that you felt in the past?
No, not as much as we used to. I mean, it used to be so thick you could cut it with a knife, but it's now to the point where we still have moments when it gets, pretty energetic. I mean, if my wife and I get in an argument or something, it seems to really suck up the negative energy. And something we've noticed with people, and that is we've had a lot of visitors to the ranch over the years, and some people that maybe are not 100% well-grounded emotionally, it seems to bring the worst out in them, to the point where we've had people that just for no good reason all of a sudden would have a terrible crying fit, or, we've had people that have had terrible anxiety for no good reason, never had a problem with anxiety, and literally, got up in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, threw their stuff in their vehicle and just split. And, I mean, literally they were running out of here in their underwear. So it affects, the ranch affects people differently. The energy on the ranch affects people differently. Some people, it seems to make them very animated and very positive and very, just to the point where they act like they've had 1 or 2 cocktails and you can't shut them off. But it's different for different people.
Is this something that you would, I know you have investigators come out there all the time. Do you try to keep children or pregnant women or anything like that from entering the property so that
I don't
happens
do that, but fortunately we haven't had that issue.
Okay.
Certainly if somebody wanted to bring out their kids, I'd probably try to discourage it. I don't think it's a real good idea. We have had, people that have come out for horses that have brought kids with them, and the kids just went off a rail in terms of misbehaving and, not listening to mom, and to the point where she literally just had to put them in the car and take them home because they're out of control.
Have you, you were saying earlier that there's been a lot of testing on the energetic properties of or the energetic principles of the property, rather. Have you found that there is high levels of electromagnetic frequency, either coming from the ground or coming from the sky towards the ground? How is that being measured?
Well, a couple of different ways. I mean, again, this was more of a sort of people noticed things rather than, they actually said, hey, we're going to test for this specific thing. But when people come to the ranch, they usually use a GPS because it's still out in the middle of nowhere to some extent. And inevitably, they always tell me that their GPS is wrong. It's off by a couple of miles. It's off by 20 minutes. It's off, and we've had people fly over in a plane. In fact, we have a couple of friends now that we've met through this whole thing that are pilots, and, they're actually doing some studies to find out what the magnetic anomalies are out here. For another thing that we find, and that is, doesn't matter how good batteries you buy for your vehicles, they only last about 6 months out here, and then they get sucked dry. And, I used to, get the really good warranties on batteries because we went through so many batteries a year in cars. And, inevitably, 6 months, 8 months, dead as a hammer.
Yeah, I give you a lot of credit. I mean, you put up with an awful lot there. When they were showing you things, that the special ores and the gold and such, were they willing to leave some behind for you to maintain your lifestyle and help the animals, or what?
No, I didn't even ask them. I hate to say I was in shock, but I was dumbfounded. And I mean, it takes a lot to kind of knock me off my center, but I was knocked off by my center. And so is Joyce. I mean, my wife is learned to be a very rational, logical person over the years with me, and she asks really good questions. And, we tried to ask them about, like, where they were from and what it was like. And, but, I mean, we sound like a bunch of just rank, kids. I mean, we just, tourists. We really, I wasn't impressed with my own performance in terms of asking these guys good questions.
You had healings done. Has your wife gone there? I know that you said she's been dealing with medical maladies and issues. Was that something that was also effective for her?
Well, that's the whole thing. That was my first thing that I wanted from Christopher is that I wanted to get her signed up for healings. And he is doing healings with her, and they seem to be helping. She had, as a result of the diagnosis that she was given, chronic fatigue syndrome, to the point where no matter how, I mean, my wife could sleep for 2 days and wake up and go back to sleep again for another, half a day. She never gets enough sleep, and she never feels rested. And she eats perfectly. She takes supplements. Everything that we could do for her to get her healthy, we have tried for years, and it's not really helping much. But since she started working with Chris, she's starting to feel better. Her whole affect, the way that she relates to me, the way that she walks around, she now has a smile on her face, which is, for me, that's like a miracle. And the other thing that's real interesting is I told you about that reunion that we had with these guys, the aliens. They actually said that because I came out and told my story, now they want to come out and tell their story. And that's sort of the big bombshell, and that is they want to go public. And there is a little dissension amongst the group in terms of who gets to tell what and what's going to happen and when they're going to do it and, what that's all going to look like. But it actually looks like they are going to go public.
And make it a mass release to the world, or just...
Yes.
Okay. And have they given you any indication of when something like that might take place?
No, I was pretty much dumbfounded again by it. These guys have a good habit of kind of knocking me off my center. And, I told them, I said, well, what's that going to look like? Are we going to have, like, the big news conference? Where are we going to do it from? You're going to have the ships, the whole works. And they said yes to pretty much everything, So there's talk that we're going to do it from the ranch. They say that the ship would be available, but I don't know when, and I don't know anything about yet what that's going to look like. All I know is that, in person, face-to-face, I was told that this is something that they want to do, that they believe that it's important for the world to understand that, there's many races that have been here for eons, and that, they want to be part of doing something better. This whole ascension, like I wrote in the book, that's about changing the world to a better place. That's about using better technology. That's about cleaning up the world. That's about creating better relations, not only between all of us as humans, but between different races. And so, I mean, sounds really good. I don't know if it's going to, I don't know if anything's going to come out of it, but, they're expressing to me that they have this desire to move forward with it. And, we'll just see what it looks like over time. I'll be more than happy to put out a press release, when it's time.
Well, I know for 10 years we've been doing the show, now into our 11th year, and quite a few people have come forward saying things like this, that it's, that these beings seem to want to come forward and make this known, but nothing ever happens. Does it ever get frustrating for you, feeling like, maybe you're being rope-a-doped a little bit to look foolish or look like you don't know what you're talking about, so that there's still plausible deniability on their side?
Well, I told them this. I said, this is the way I see it in my head. Okay, y'all come out here. We do this thing. I'm not going to announce it until I see the spaceship over my ranch. You're all out there, and we're all on the same page. And then at that point, if it's absolutely positively for real, and there's no chance that anybody's going to back up and make me look like I'm just some yahoo, then I'm ready to do my part, to introduce everybody and explain the circumstances, But until then, it's nothing but a barbecue.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got half an hour left with our guest, John Edmonds, here.
Well, I mean, that is something that we're looking at. I mean, there is a tremendous amount of energy from these portals, and he seems to be able to turn them on and turn them off pretty much at will. And, we actually had individuals that were in other countries that supposedly were in high places calling us and saying, what the heck are you doing? You're creating something, doing something, you're activating something there that is causing us to be reading it at our end. And one of those places was CERN.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And, I mean, you make a lot of claims with this story. I mean, do you have a lot of documentation to back up the things that you've seen and like talking about the fact that CERN is able to measure these kind of readings there?
I don't have anything except a phone call that occurred while we were actually out there on the property and he was working with it. That's it. I mean, it's not like they sent me a telegram or something.
Did they, and how do you know that it was actually people from CERN that were responding to you then?
Well, it was Switzerland, and, they said that's because we asked them who they were and where they were, and they said CERN. So, I don't know if it was true, but that's what they told me.
The chunk of alien heart or whatever it was that you impaled the sword through the alien and alien vanished, and you've got that chunk of alien jerky. What did you do with that, and what kind of testing has been done on that?
It was all sent to Levengood in Grass Lakes, Michigan, and he sent it off to at least 2, if not 3 universities, to people that he had worked with. I believe they're Michigan universities, and they tested it. And when the information came back, they said that it was definitely not from anything of this world, that the tissues contain both plant-type tissue and actual protein, like animal or some kind of physical being-type tissue. And they said they'd never seen anything like that because it had hemoglobin that was actually also attached to the plant matter. And they said those two things just don't go together.
It would seem, and do you have, I mean, were you able to obtain those records from the facilities that tested those pieces?
I was not. Before we could get anything like that directly, all we have is the information that was written by Dr. Levengood and by his assistant, and it was written in a report, and in that report they actually sent us micrographs of the actual tissue samples being tested and the evidence, and that's all on the website. They said, Dr. Levengood had told me straight out, he goes, John, you've got the smoking gun. He says, you have absolute proof that alien life is here on Earth.
You have this. Why is this not being more widespread? Why didn't Levengood bring this out to the mainstream and the public? Why haven't we been talking about this on, 2020, 60 Minutes, whatever, to get this out there?
Well, nobody's come to me and asked me. But, I only just started telling about all this because of the fact that a friend of mine from Hawaii, Tommy Hawksblood, who's been in the UFO community for most of his life working, he just kept calling me every single day, literally once or twice a day, and saying, John, you got to tell your story. You got to tell your story. And I just kept saying, I don't know. I don't want to deal with all the fallout from it. I just want to sell the ranch and move on and, do something completely different. And hopefully this stuff won't somehow or another rub off on me, and I'll be able to go and have a, semi-normal life with my wife someplace. So eventually he just got me to the point where I said, all right, let's give it a shot and see what happens. I guess I can always change my name and disappear if it blows up on my face. So, that's what we did.
Have you had a chance to go in any of the craft and leave our planet?
I'm going to tell you this, and that is that that's a story that will be told a different day.
All right. We'll have to have you back when you're ready to share the rest of the story.
I'd be happy to. There's so much attached to this, Dave. I mean, I grant you, this is enough to make some people just, kind of pull their hair and walk away and say the guy's full of it. But, we have some pretty good evidence. And, I think, I've been interviewed by, people that were in various different alphabet agencies, and, they never came back and said that we were full of it or I was full of it. So, I mean, I know I'm telling the truth, and my wife is telling the truth, and everybody that's experienced it out here with us at one time or another was telling the truth. So it is what it is. People can take it or leave it. If they don't like it, that's cool. It's not going to break my heart or, affect my feelings about it one way or the other. I know what happened.
Do you find that in dealing with this, the more attention you give to it, the more you open up to it, the more susceptible you become to it continuing on? Do you think if you would have shut down and not given it energy, do you think it might have gone away?
No, I tried that. I mean, I tried every which way you can ignore something like this. I mean, my wife and I, we used to, when things would happen, we literally, we did everything to try to ignore it. It got so bad with my wife with things coming after her that she used to beg me to go ahead and put handcuffs on her ankle and handcuff her to the bed because she was so frightened that she was going to get taken, and we tried everything, and I just, I kept saying, no, I know that if we get in our faith and that we, pray and that we, just rebuke this stuff, eventually it's going to get better. And it has.
Are you in a situation now where, I know you said that things don't always happen on a regular basis, but do you have experiences now that are as profound, or do they seem like they're finally tapering down and winding up?
I think they're less profound than they were. I think the fact that we finally, had the group come out here and do stuff, I think that made a big difference, and I think that having Christopher out here has made a big difference. We know that there is some kind of cycle to what we see, I mean, we haven't tried to keep like really good records, but we think that about every 72 days, these gates have a tendency to open, maybe automatically, and that is when we see literally dozens of ships go through. We've had people come out with the night vision goggles, and they're just blown away because of how much stuff they see.
Do you have any future meetings planned with these alien beings?
Well, I mean, they have, now that they have a way to contact me directly, and that the leader of their group is given them permission, and that they're talking to us again. Since Sunday, I've had 3 meetings. I've had 3 visits. So they were, just kind of like come out and check stuff out and look around for this Fulgurite stuff. And, they were cordial. Everything was good. Spent a couple hours, and I think it was just they're kind of trying to decide if what to do next. I think that I'm not really sure that there's a lot of unity between these groups. I think they're trying to figure it out themselves. And I just said, look, when it's time, if you want to step forward and make an announcement, that's great. If you don't, hey, that's up to you too.
Are they?
I'm not trying to steer it one way or the other.
Sure. But, I mean, it seems like if they're on the precipice of wanting to come forward and doing this, again, I don't understand. Do they explain to you what the trepidation is, why they're holding back, why they haven't, just appeared in the sky in a massive Independence Day way to let us know we're here, we mean you no harm?
Well, I think there's something to realize here, and that is just because these guys are available, that doesn't mean that they speak for, ETs all over the world, or that the's any kind of cohesion between this group and other groups.
Right, but why not just out your own group?
Of groups.
Right, we but if the Nordics or the Palladians, the Venusians, whatever, the Martians want to come forward, why not just say, okay, I can't tell you about the rest. All I can tell you is that our race exists, and here's where we are, here's what we bring, and let's work together in peace and harmony.
I can't answer that. I don't know. I might be able to guess at it, and that is maybe there's some kind of sort of a an agreement between the races, and that they've all been pretty quiet, and maybe they've just agreed to stay in that state of mind until something happened. And maybe this is the event that causes them to come forward in a larger, way. But I don't know that there's, I'm guessing at that. That's pure, just conjecture on my part.
All right. John, it's been a pleasure speaking with you this evening and covering your book, The Ascension Code, which comes out again March 9th. That'll be out in the stores. People can pre-order it through Amazon.com. I'm sure you and I will be keeping in touch because this is something that fascinates me, and I'd love to continue to explore this and see what else there is to find. Are you open to people visiting you and having experiences of their own?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I'm not trying to become Alien Disneyland. I'm not out here just saying, hey, come on, folks. Anybody and their brother, come on, and because I got to have a life in the meantime. And I know from some of the other interviews that we've gotten a tremendous amount of attention. What I would tell people is this: if you really want to do something good, please go to Hopeful Hooves and make a donation, because it costs a lot of money to feed these horses.
Well, and that's what my thoughts were.
Totally happy with that.
I'm sure if you offered the opportunity for people to camp out there and charge them, the money going to help the horses and the animals that you take in, I think you'd end up being able to facilitate quite a bit of money in for the animals for that charity.
I am willing to do that. As long as people come here with good intentions and they're here for learning. They're here for just brotherhood. Cool, no problem.
Do you believe that if you worked with the alien races, that they would make themselves known if you brought in a large group of people that were willing to make healthy donations to help the horses? Do you believe that the aliens would work in your favor and at least give a light show or something, show up to give people an experience?
It's possible. I mean, I might actually be willing to go to them and ask them to do that, just because I need the money for the horse.
Well, then let's do this, John.
I can't, honestly, I mean, what I don't want to do is this. I mean, if this is going to be about disclosure, I think disclosure needs to be from the bottom up, not the top down. I don't think the government's ever going to do it. What I don't want to do is mess it up by asking them to do me favors because I need to feed the horses. I'm happy if that is their true desire to come forward and put on a display and teach everybody. Far out. I think that's great. But it's not going to be about me. This whole thing is not about me. I am purely the person that literally stepped in a big stinking mess. And I'm just trying to turn it into something positive for the world.
Well, I think if these beings,
positive for my family,
right? If these beings are all about love and light and making things better and understanding what you're doing there, I would gather that if they're that close to breaking the news, that allowing themselves to be witnessed and seen by a collected group that's there to do something and bring positive energy and good intention to a location, in the order to help. And not just for selfish reasons. I mean, it's selfish to a degree because everybody wants to see and experience this for themselves. But if in the long term it is helping and it's uniting people from different parts of the world and different parts of our country to share an experience, I would think that would only help their
I agree. That makes a lot of sense. That's a good human agenda. I don't know how much of that they track with or how much of that they share. That remains to be seen. It's just going to take some time just to shake this thing out and see where it goes.
Well, then I propose
I just don't want to speak for anybody or put words in their mouths.
Maybe what I propose then, John, is let's coordinate, you and I, and we'll talk about bringing a group of people out there that are willing to make healthy donations for the horses and for the property to have an experience and come out and meet you and your wife and see the evidence that you've brought together. Hear the stories one-on-one, and that they can address you questions FaceTime that way, and then
I'd be happy with that too.
We do some night sky watches and see what we can find over a weekend. Why don't we look at doing that sometime this summer, if that's possible?
Yeah, it's awful hot here. It gets about 120.
Okay, let's look at doing that in the fall next year, and we'll find a time that might be a little bit more conducive to do an outing. But John, I'd appreciate that opportunity. I know so many of our listeners would. Again, where can they go make an immediate donation?
Go to, actually, they can just send it to the ranch. I mean, in terms of, send a check or a money order or whatever they feel comfortable with. I can give you the address.
Well, why don't you, what's the website? Because I'm sure they can find the information that way.
Hopeful Hooves, HOPEFULHOOVES.org is our 501c3 charitable website. And we are a charity, a legitimate charity, so your deduction, or rather your donation, is tax deductible.